Okay, that's me. Thank you for inviting me. I'm dealing with the RoHS directive since about 3 years. I'm working in the waste unit in DG Environment, and I've been following the discussion since the first reading agreement on the RoHS 2 directive. I understand that I was invited to give you a presentation. What I said is I cannot promise that I will give you a presentation, and I kept the promise. I don't have a presentation for you. What I have is sort of an introduction to the directive and its intricacies, because it is complicated. And I will simply talk you through the history of the directive and through the technical issues that might interest you, especially related to CE marking and DOC, or new legislative framework. Problem is that I do have a mic, but it doesn't help because it's just for the recording. So I hope you all hear me. No. So yeah, that's why I'm asking you. And I.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I will stay here, and hope that's okay for you. Yeah, I don't know if you're all aware of the old RoHS directive. In 2002, the Commission made a package of the RoHS directive and the V directive. They were interlinked, they were connected, because even the scope of the old RoHS directive referred to the V directive. V is about waste electronics, and RoHS is about the restriction of hazardous substances in electronics. And the simple principle was that you have a directive, and you have, now it is an annex. Originally it was in the text of the directive itself. You have a list of restricted substances. So if you have a product that is in scope, you have to meet those substance restrictions. Only later, in the first amendment, it was spelled out that meeting the substance restrictions, or being RoHS substance free, means you meet the limit values of 0.1 and in one case 0.01% of the substance. Not only in the product, it's always in the homogeneous material. Homogeneous material means you're below even the component level. Simplified version, homogeneous material means you have something that you cannot discard anymore. With simple physical means, you cannot take it apart, you cannot break it, grind it, whatever. That is homogeneous material. Even if it's multiple layers, if you cannot separate it, that's where you measure the concentration of those substances. The substances are, simple guess, heavy metals. It is lead, cadmium, mercury, chromium-6, and some organic substances, brominated flame retardants. And the idea was always to, because that was a limited scope then, back in 2002, or rather in 2006, when the whole thing entered into force or became effective. The idea was both to extend the scope, cover a broader range of products, and maybe also extend the number of restricted substances. An adaptation to technical progress. The whole purpose was not only to produce safe products, but also to simplify, facilitate, foster recycling. I think we achieved it, but of course what we had to do, because several things happened in the meantime. One was that the whole REACH complex was launched, and we have a huge package of legislation under REACH, chemicals legislation, and that we also have the new legislative framework. And the idea of the recast that we launched in 2008 was to align the RoHS directive with those two legislative packages, with chemicals legislation and with the new legislative framework. again, simplified version, that means that we introduce the CE marking and declaration of conformity, meaning that a product that is not only safe, meets all other technical requirements, a product that is in the RoHS scope has to have the CE mark. If it complies, if it doesn't comply, then you're not allowed to place it on the market. Right?
It means it needs no more separate declaration as it was used before.
Exactly.
It's only the CE marking. Yeah?
There are a few changes, but it's more complicated than
Okay.
that. It's
why I
not that
asked.
easy. Yeah, we'll get there. What we also did is extend the scope. The Commission wanted to extend the scope to two product groups that were already addressed in the old V directive but excluded from the scope of the RoHS directive. That is medical devices and monitoring control instruments. Those sectors were prepared for the change. What came as a surprise from Council or from the co-legislators was the introduction of a scope category 11, because there's a number of scope categories, and 11 is now all other EEE. And that is, of course, a major change. And that comes in hand with another change, because there were always discussions or controversies about the correct interpretation of the directive, and some member states were more ambitious. What is a EEE? And there we introduced a definition of dependent on electricity. And now we have a definition that says a finished product is dependent on electricity if it needs electricity, electric currents or electromagnetic fields to fulfill at least one intended function. And we had those cases, some sound real silly, like the singing teddy bears or the sports shoes with lights, or we had cases like some electric kettle that has a minor function, or we had things that were running on petrol, for example, but needed electricity to start the engine. And now the interpretation is that all these products are in scope of the new directive. Interpretation of the Commission was that those products were not in the scope of the old directive, but that position is not shared by all member states, so that is a warning, because in the end it's the national legislation that applies. However, as a general line, I would say these products are newly in scope. Things with a minor electric function that is nonetheless essential, meaning you need the electric spark to start the petrol-driven lawnmower. It doesn't work without it, so it's in scope. You won't buy the singing teddy bear or the integrated wardrobe with moving doors and integrated lighting and everything if this doesn't work. So these products are in scope of the new directive. And the cables are another big issue. Here I have cables. Thank you. The cables are addressed in the directive. They're sort of, they're not a gray area product, but they have a very special status. They're something very peculiar, because it's nowhere said that they are EEE, but still they are mentioned and have to meet the same criteria as other EEE. I mean, it's easy to define them as products for the transfer of electricity. So they are, in fact, EEE and covered by the directive, but now it's spelled out, the cables are in scope. And there you have to differentiate between cables that are permanently attached to product. I don't know, you have some lamps or something. That is simple, that is part of the product. That is just a component. And then you have cables that are come separately that maybe you can replace with other cables, and then you have even multi-purpose cables, or you have cables that are finished products that you use for connecting different devices. And then you have a problem, because then the whole discussion about CE marking starts. If you can show that this cable belongs to a product and is covered by the DOC and the CE mark of the product, for example, you buy a laptop, you buy it with the cable. Even if you can plug it in, take it off. You need no separate CE mark. But you buy a new charger. Terribly sorry. Cable. Okay. Yeah. That is clearly something that should have a CE mark. But then again, there's a discussion that we need to have about what's the compliance date for this requirement. Other issues: components, consumables. Position on consumables has changed because due to that change in the definition of EEE. So, for example, printer cartridges, electricity runs through it. In our opinion, that is a finished product. Needs a CE mark, needs to meet the substance requirements. But then comes the important message. All the RoHS requirements apply to the single individual product. It's not important when you first place the product on the market. If the series is already on the market for, I don't know, 50 years, I mean, of course this would be ridiculous, because that would mean that you can produce the same products with hazardous metals for another 100 years, because you've produced them once, you may produce them forever. This is wrong. We always receive those questions. Everything applies to the single product. You want to place a product on the market, you have a defined compliance date. After the date, you cannot do that anymore. After the date, you need to meet the substance requirements, and you need the procedural requirements, including marking and documentation.
Are there somewhere these compliance dates mentioned? Because there are different dates now for the different sectors. Are they on the website also? Or,
You will find them on the website, but what I recommend is that you have a look at the FAQs. If you go to activities, left-hand side, third entry, FAQ guidance document. There, there is an active link. Yep. There you will find this, but the compliance dates are spelled out in Article 4.3. And there's already big misunderstanding, because people think that the scope is gradually extended. This is wrong. All these products that are newly in scope are in scope from yeah, they are in scope at least from January 3, 2013. Because that is when the directive entered into force. The old directive was repealed, and member states had to transpose the directive, which like 95% of all member states already did. We have 3 open cases of non-transposition that we will also probably close in the coming month.
Here are the dates and when do the new provisions of RoHS 2 apply?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And the whole thing starts January 3, 2013. January 2 was the repeal date. everything is in scope from that date. Only the compliance requirements kick in later. And that comes gradually. Medical devices monitoring control instruments, mid-July 2014. 2 years later, 2016, in vitro medical devices, subcategory. 1 year later, industrial monitoring control instruments. Industrial, that is important because industrial is very broad. Industrial here is explained as industrial and professional monitoring control equipment. And in line with the new legislative framework, our interpretation of professional use is the intention of the distributor, manufacturer and distributor, the way a product is marketed. I mean, you can never exclude that some nerd, some hobby gardener or forester buys some huge, I don't know what, harvesting machines and industrial tools. That happens. I mean, I remember my dad running around with some multimeters for I don't know how many, few thousand euro. I mean, you can buy those things, but they are still professional. Things that are promoted as dual use, things that you can buy at Brico are clearly non-professional. They are consumer equipment.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to make the difference. It's also in other directives to make the difference between consumer products and professional products.
Sure.
Yeah, very, very difficult thing.
Well, I think that interpretation is in line with what we already said in the old Blue Guide, and that won't change. And that is a conservative approach and also gives some legal certainty. I mean, of course, there are some examples where you could also take a different approach, but I don't see the use of it. Okay, so you have several steps, and the last one is 20. Why is there 23? It should be 22nd of July 2019. And that is when all products in scope have to meet all requirements. Now, who is concerned? The directive lists several economic operators, manufacturers. They can mandate authorized representatives, but only for rather unimportant issues, for dealing with authorities and for keeping the DOC and technical documentation. Importers and distributors. They cannot name a representative. Now, simple approach. You have a product in scope, and that is almost everything. For the electrified wardrobe, that is maybe an interesting example, because there are things you can buy at IKEA that you just assemble yourself, and where you might claim that an IKEA shelf has so many holes that it makes no difference if you put the light in or not. There you might claim that you have two separate products, the lighting system and the bookshelf or wardrobe or whatever. That sounds legit. That means you have two products and you don't have to meet any criteria for the MDF boards thing. However, if this is fully integrated, and I've seen these things that you cannot take apart, that really comes like a household robot.
Well, they have additional installation equipment.
Yeah.
They add to the product, so
Yeah.
different cables or,
Then you have
or switches or whatever,
Yeah.
and then they create a new product.
Yeah, you have a full integral product that is new in scope, benefits from this grace period until mid-2019, but it is clearly in scope as a product, and it will then have to meet all requirements for the whole product. Will have to come with a CE mark, will have to meet the substance restrictions, even in the mechanical parts.
For the colleagues, the furniture industry, you never expect them to be concerned by CE marking. You see, it's not only from the RoHS side, but also from the electrical, from low voltage side, or EMC. It's the same. So we have lots of furniture companies in Germany. They are really quarreling with that thing and searching for the right process to integrate these things in the. It's not yet really perfect. I think.
No, I understand it, and I think there might also be issues with flame retardants. Probably less with metals,
Plastics.
but yeah, of course. But there's something they have to sort out before mid-2019, the way it is now. And the grace period that I just mentioned is tricky because if you have a product that is newly in scope, same for medical devices, only that it is just until mid-2014. You feel free to place a product on the market before that date, a single piece of machinery, without CE mark, without DOC, with high content of lead, cadmium, whatever. You can do that, but the problem is you benefit from the grace period, you can circulate the product, you can resell it, etc. But this is the only case where you're not protected from retroactive interventions. That means you place the product on the market, you expect that you can resell it forever, refurbish it, repair it. It's not true. Because the grace period, the wording is awkward. It's not 100% sure if this was the intention of the legislator, but the thing is that 2019 you can take those products off the market. For medical devices, this is dramatic because that is like half term. After 5 years, you bring them in for refurbishment and get a new one, some CT or big machinery. They will not be able to do that anymore because you cannot use these things anymore because you're not allowed to execute secondary market operations.
Do you know if the member states made control about this directive, the first directive, RoHS directive, do the member state made control on the application?
The enforcement, yeah, there. I mean, some member states are very active. Some didn't do anything, and
On the conformity of the product.
yeah. I mean, it's difficult, but what we see is, RoHS 1 was like the products that you would expect. Things that come as a box, with a switch, with a cable. That is what you typically expect when you talk about EEE, electrical electronic equipment. With RoHS 2, it's different. The classic products, I don't know, DVD player, they don't have any compliance issues. Whether they come from Korea or Japan or even from China, they even notify when they have compliance issues and even stop their production for a day. We had that case. Where we have the big problems are the products at the margins. Every time I see enforcement reports and I meet the enforcement guys from all the member states every year, it's always the same story, and it doesn't change, it doesn't get better. That's imported Chinese cheap toys, and there we are not talking about do these toys meet the 0.1% limit value. There we are talking about massive lead solders. I can call that contaminated products. I see safety issues there, or health issues for kids. That's not about the fancy details of the directive.
Yeah, the market surveillance is very difficult in that sector because you do not know what is inside. Yeah, you do not smell it. So this is very, very difficult. The thing is, normally they must give it to a laboratory for a screening or something. This is possible. This they do also if they have doubt. And when do they have doubt? They have doubt if they look at the declaration of conformity. And there is no RoHS mentioned. Yeah,
but declaration of conformity is only now, and the whole system now will make it easier. Yeah. But in the past, it was just you will find that if you want to have an overview, go to the British NMO page because they've done a lot. They really have the enforcement experience and expertise. National Measurement Office. It's a NMO government page, UK. Just enter NMO RoHS enforcement, you will find it. And there you will also find all the different RoHS logos, which might be interesting because you might want to ask me if this is still legally viable. And there I can only tell you that's not 100% clear. Because in principle, I mean, the CE marking is the only thing that has a meaning now, because the CE marking indicates that this product is not only compliant with other NLF legislation, it indicates that it's also compliant with the RoHS, with the new RoHS directive. However, the RoHS directive itself says nothing about other marks, and the whole framework thing only says that you're not allowed to use other marks that might be misleading regarding the meaning of the CE mark. Now, if I have a product that is RoHS compliant and I have the CE mark, why should another additional sign, and in the past there were like 10 different signs, preferably in green. Yeah, sure. Why should that be misleading? It only confirms and supports what the CE mark says. But of course, member states don't want to see that, and we're all hoping that in the long run the CE mark will replace all these other RoHS marks. But there I had to say, when we drafted the FAQs with the member states, I'm terribly sorry, I cannot write other marks are not allowed, because it's not true, neither from the wording of the directive nor from the legislative framework.
Yeah, they have been developed the last 6 years because there was no RoHS marking. So.
Exactly, yeah. Which doesn't mean that we cannot stop them if we want to, or if we have the legal instrument, but no, we don't have it. As simple as that. Now, when do you need that CE mark? And that relates to what I said before about the grace period. I mean, you can place a product on the market before the respective compliance date, and of course the product won't have a CE mark, because that is also part of the interpretation of the grace period in Article 2.2. So you produce a product that is in theory fully compliant, meets the substance requirements, is below the limit values. Maybe you even ran the whole procedure for testing the product. Maybe even in compliance with the harmonized standard that we have, EN 5581, for the presumption of conformity, and still you don't CE mark your product. I think that would be pretty stupid, because you then limit your options after 2019. Again, medical devices, you may want to refurbish them, or other products you simply want to resell them, all secondary market operations, you're not allowed to do that. Simple solution, of course, if you meet the substance requirements, you can also affix the CE mark. We checked it with our lawyers. There's no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to do that earlier. As soon as your product is in scope, of course. And it is in scope as from 3rd of January.
We always tell the companies, you can, there is a deadline, but you can do it earlier. It's a European law. It's already in your product is under the scope. You can do it, even if there is not yet a national transposition or whatever.
Yeah. It keeps you from trouble. It means that you then have a fully compliant product, and you can do after the end of the grace period with the product whatever you want. Because the basic principle is a compliant product, once placed on the market, is not restricted in its product life, because there is no retroactive restriction. Okay, that was Article 2.2. Article 7.6, internal production control. Also something people ask me. What if I have a product that falls within the scope of several directives, medical devices, etc., if I have different procedures? Yeah, the stricter procedure applies. RoHS says if you, for example, need a third-party certification or something, if you need a different procedure, and that is at least as strict, at least as stringent as the procedure that RoHS requires, you can do that. And of course, you can have one CE mark and one one CE mark, but you can have one DOC. Again, this is not a legal requirement. Nothing.
Running.
Yeah.
If you give a product to a notified body and to check it according to medical device, it's maybe not included the RoHS.
Yeah,
test.
maybe. Yeah. So in theory, you can have more than one DOC, but of course, that is nothing that we want to see. And what else? Those were the key issues. It's already 5:30.
I have a
Questions?
special question, because this RoHS is now a CE marking directive, but there are no notified bodies. How do you say? Named or notified. No, it is the question of the companies coming to us, to which laboratory we should go for testing of RoHS. Are there special laboratories, are they notified or whatever? So this is a question.
What are you telling them?
I tell them that there are
doesn't exist. Yeah. I mean, there are many laboratories that are capable of doing that, but we just didn't establish that system under the RoHS directive. So, yeah. No,
So
but
it's
that
not
is
planned to establish such.
no, because that would be a major change. Then the
Yeah.
alignment with the new legislative framework should have looked differently.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they didn't touch it.
No, that was not wanted. Probably also because they didn't want to interfere with the already established regime and yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's simply it's an important point. It doesn't exist. Yeah.
Laboratories. It's a market for laboratories.
What does it mean that it's every laboratory who is experienced in testing and this testing can be certified can do this under RoHS?
Yeah.
Yeah, from my point of view, we have that harmonized standards which are now developed under the RoHS directive.
True.
Yes? On technical documentation, it is already harmonized, the standard, but the testing standards are not yet.
581, and the testing standards are under revision.
Yeah, and if they are once revised, then they are going to be harmonized, and then the laboratories needed accreditation for that standard, and then you have a clear, compliance with that system.
True, yeah.
Even if they are not notified and then are accredited for that testing standard, then they have the condition.
And it hasn't been done yet.
No.
No,
The testing standard is not harmonized until now.
Yeah. What's the number? Something with it's a series 60.
Yeah, I don't know it by heart.
Yeah. No, but I mean it's testing is just a part of the procedure. I think that's also an important message. You can, I mean, you know, if you want to test a laptop, if you want to demonstrate compliance for a simple laptop, maybe the thing costs, I don't know, consumer equipment, €700, cheap one. You want to demonstrate compliance via testing of all components. You probably go up to €10,000, guess.
We have 200 materials maybe inside, and every material.
It just doesn't work that way.
And
So
you
what
don't homologize it and
No. There are screening systems now. You put it in, and the testing equipment is only screening if these RoHS, these forbidden substances are not in, and if they found there is lead.
Yeah.
You get no value, but you only get the message out of the screening. There is lead inside, and then they have to check where could the lead be and how is the concentration.
But I mean the harmonized standard for the presumption of conformity, Article 16, in 58581, that builds on 3 pillars, and testing is just one part. What you need is contracts with your suppliers. What you need is supply declarations and material declarations. I mean, if you have quality materials and if you have suppliers you can trust, then you can already reduce your chemical engineering efforts.
This is required in the technical documentation standard,
Exactly,
which is already harmonized. So it is required. So to comply with RoHS, you have to apply that. You should have applied that standard, and there the material declaration and declaration of conformity and all the tests maybe that company did, that supplier did, must be documented.
Yep. Thank you.
What about spare parts for category 11, please? There is nothing in the directive. Will it be completed next year?
There's something that we have to fix in the scope review. There's something that I didn't mention. I mentioned that there are problems with Article 2.2, and that we already developed a series of scenarios how we could possibly fix this. But of course, you're right, in Article 4.4, there is no entry for spare parts for Category 11 or other products newly in scope, because you need not necessarily classify them Category 11. It might also be new in scope in an old category due to the definition of dependent on electricity. Depends on the member state. Some want to have them all in Category 11, some just say, okay, this is Category 2, but still new in scope because it only has a minor electric function, etc. We have no spare part provision for these new products. That means for the moment, after July 2019, you cannot refurbish, resell those products. That's what I already mentioned. Neither can you repair them. Something that, in my opinion, we have to change, because I don't see why this should be environmentally friendly. But
if
this
one
is
not complying, then the whole thing is not complying.
yeah, sure. Because, yeah, maybe I have to explain that. The principle of the directive is that you place a product on the market, you have a deadline, you do it before the deadline. Product can contain all those substances, can come without CE marking, etc. Once on the market, you can repair it with spare parts of the same quality, meaning containing same materials, because at some date we are approaching the end of the lifetime in any case, and it's not environmentally friendly to shorten the lifetime of a product by cutting off the spare part supply. But for those new products, this provision doesn't exist. It exists with the same gradual approach, with fully aligned compliance dates. For medical devices, from medical devices to industrial monitoring control instruments, but not for the other products that you may place on the market until mid-2019. But that requires a co-decision procedure. That means we will go into the legal procedure mid-next year and into negotiations with Council and Parliament.